The unexpected downgrade, Sundar. Pichai sat quietly in the airport lounge, sipping his tea and reviewing notes for his upcoming keynote speech. The CEO of Google was en route to a major tech conference in Europe, where he was scheduled to unveil a groundbreaking initiative aimed at bridging the digital divide. His itinerary was meticulously planned, with a business-class seat reserved to ensure he arrived well-rested and prepared. The Times +1, 11 Python Alchemist, 11 time +1 well, A's boarding commenced. Sundar approached the gate, only to be met with an apologetic airline staff member. "Mr. Pichai, we're terribly sorry, but due to an aircraft change, we've had to reassign some seats. Unfortunately, your seat has been downgraded to economy." Sundar paused, processing the information. He considered the implications: a cramped seat, limited rest, and the potential impact on his performance. Yet, without a hint of frustration, he nodded and said, "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." The economic time she boarded the plane, finding his new seat between a young student engrossed in a coding textbook and an elderly woman knitting a scarf. As the plane ascended, Sundar engaged in light conversation, learning about the student's aspirations in computer science and the woman's journey to visit her grandchildren. 8 minutes into the flight, a commotion stirred at the front of the cabin. The airline president had boarded the plane, making his way directly to Sundar's seat. With a mix of surprise and humility, Sundar looked up as the president extended his hand. "Mr. Pichai, I must apologize personally for the inconvenience. Please, allow me to escort you to a more comfortable seat." Sundar smiled gently, replying, "I appreciate the gesture, but I'm quite comfortable here. Besides, it's been a pleasure meeting my fellow passengers." The president, taken aback by Sundar's humility, nodded respectfully. "Very well, sir. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to ask." As the president returned to the front, the cabin buzzed with whispers. The CEO of Google had chosen to remain in economy, valuing connection over comfort. This unexpected decision set the tone for the journey ahead, leaving passengers and crew alike inspired by his example. Wired +4 wired +C4 times so. But, as the flight continued, Sundar couldn't shake a nagging thought. Something about the airline's sudden change felt off, and he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story than met the eye. Little did he know. This flight was just the beginning of a series of events that would challenge his principles and test his resilience in unforeseen ways. Turbulence at 30,000 feet. The quiet hum of the cabin filled Sundar Pichai's ears as he leaned back against the thin padding of the economy seat. Outside the window, the sky melted into endless blue, but inside his thoughts were clouded. The moment with the airline president had passed, but it left behind an unsettling ripple. Something didn't sit right. He had traveled enough to know mistakes happened. Downgrades weren't unheard of. But this felt different, too deliberate, too coincidental. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a breath, trying to let it go. He had a keynote to prepare for, after all. Yet just as he began to drift into a half-sleep, the turbulence started. Not the usual gentle tremble of high-altitude winds, but sharp jolting shakes that rattled the tray tables and made overhead compartments creak. Gasps echoed through the cabin. The elderly woman beside him clutched her scarf, her knuckles pale. The student looked up, worry written across his young face. "Is it serious?" the boy asked. Sundar looked him in the eye, giving a reassuring nod. "Planes are built to handle this. We'll be fine." But even as he spoke the words, a flight attendant rushed past, her expression carefully controlled, yet betraying a hint of concern. The captain's voice soon followed over the intercom, calm but firm, informing passengers of unexpected weather and the need to reroute. Sundar leaned forward slightly. He had access to real-time weather data on his phone through Google's own services. Pulling it up discreetly, he noticed something odd. Their new flight path was diverting far south, not toward milder skies, but seemingly into more unpredictable weather patterns. His mind raced. Was this truly just bad weather? Or was something else happening? The student next to him resumed reading, and the elderly woman began murmuring a prayer under her breath, unaware of Sundar's growing unease. He didn't want to alarm anyone. He reminded himself that jumping to conclusions would help no one. Still, he tucked the thought away. Data doesn't lie. and the data on his screen didn't make sense. 30 minutes later, the turbulence stopped as abruptly as it had begun. A strange silence fell over the plane. People began to relax, stretching, laughing softly, unbuckling their belts. Sundar, however, stayed alert. The reroute had added nearly 2 hours to their flight. He pulled out a pen and notepad from his bag, something he hadn't used in a long while. With clean practice strokes, he began drafting bullet points for his speech. But as he wrote, he noticed something else. The flight attendants were whispering behind the curtain near the front of the cabin. One of them glanced back toward him. He pretended not to see. Sundar thought back to the airport lounge. The last time everything had felt normal, he remembered a man who had been watching him too closely. Dark coat, no carry-on. He had passed through security without boarding. At the time, Sundar had dismissed it as coincidence. Now, he wasn't so sure. His phone buzzed. No internet. Of course. Flight mode. But then another buzz. This time a message. His eyes narrowed. It was from an anonymous number, routed through an encrypted channel he recognized only from high-level Google security reports. The message read, "You were not supposed to be on this flight. Get ready." His breath caught. The device slipped slightly in his hand. No signature. No clue who sent it. But it was clear. Someone knew more than he did. Someone who had access to top-level encryption, the kind used only in rare internal emergencies. And whoever it was, they were watching. He looked up from the screen, heart pounding. He scanned the cabin slowly, eyes moving over every face. Most were oblivious, chatting, watching movies, dozing. But 2 rows ahead, near the emergency exit, a man in a gray suit sat stiffly, his gaze locked on Sundar, no smile. No attempt to look away when caught. Just a cold, calculated stare. Sundar turned his eyes back to the screen, pretending not to have noticed. His mind churned. Why would someone want to stop him from boarding this flight? Was it about his keynote? Or something bigger? Something he had yet to discover? His work with emerging digital infrastructure, especially in underserved regions, had always been ambitious, but now he wondered, had he stepped on the wrong toes? He thought of his family, his children, his wife. He had promised to call once he landed. The thought of them gave him strength, steadied his nerves. This wasn't just about him. Whatever was happening, he had to stay composed, had to see it through. He looked again at the message on his phone. Get ready. For what? Just then, the student beside him tapped his arm. Excuse me, sir, are you okay? Sundar forced a calm smile. Yes, just thinking. The boy nodded, clearly unsure, but polite enough not to press further. The rest of the flight passed in deceptive calm. The plane landed just past midnight in a small regional airport far from the original destination. The captain apologized for the inconvenience, citing logistical complications. Sundar gathered his things, quietly observing the suited man ahead who exited the plane quickly, disappearing into the crowd. Outside the terminal, it was raining. Cold wind swept through the open platform where passengers waited for transport. Sundar stood alone under a flickering overhead light, waiting for the shuttle. A black car rolled up instead, the window lowered, revealing a face he recognized instantly, a senior Google security officer he hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. Get in, the man said simply. Sundar hesitated, heart thudding. Then he stepped forward and pulled the door open. As the car pulled away into the wet night, the security officer looked at him grimly and said, "They know, Sundar, and they're already moving." Before Sundar could speak, the driver turned off the headlights, made a sharp turn, and the car disappeared into the shadows. The code beneath the silence rain streaked across the windshield in long, broken lines. As the black sedan cut silently through the dark countryside, the sky was a thick curtain of clouds and the road twisted through valleys and sharp bends like a trail to nowhere. Inside the car, a tense silence pressed against Sundar Pichai's ears, the hum of the engine barely louder than his own thoughts. The man beside him, Kiran, a Google security officer once in charge of classified risk operations, hadn't spoken again since that chilling statement at the airport. Sundar's voice broke the silence, low but steady. Who knows? And what exactly do they know? Kiran didn't answer immediately. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Finally, he said, "The downgrade wasn't a mistake. Neither was the turbulence. They tried to remove you from the conference, entirely. Someone inside the airline, someone with access, flagged you. Your itinerary was leaked. But that's just the surface." Sundar leaned forward slightly, absorbing every word. "Why would anyone go that far? I'm giving a speech."
Not launching a missile.
Kiran gave a humorless laugh. "You're not just giving a speech, Sundar. This initiative you're about to unveil, it threatens more than you realize. You're not just bringing internet access to underserved regions, you're shifting the center of control. And that terrifies some people." The car turned sharply, tires hissing against the wet asphalt. Sundar felt a pit open in his stomach. He had known the initiative would shake things up, but he had always believed the goal, to empower rural communities with free high-speed connectivity, was beyond reproach. He never imagined it would paint a target on his back. "You're telling me someone wants to stop a humanitarian program?" Sundar said. Kiran turned to him finally, eyes dark. "Not someone, several. Think about what you're disrupting. Control of information, data ownership, political influence. You give 1 billion people access to real information and secure communication, and you erase decades of dependency. That kind of shift threatens entire structures." The truth landed like a weight on Sundar's chest. He remembered the long nights, working on the project's strategy, the debates about data security and geopolitical fallout. He had pushed through, believing the benefits far outweighed the risks. But now, sitting in this cold car with a man he once trusted only in emergencies, Sundar felt the walls closing in. The car pulled off the main road and came to a halt near an old farmhouse, its windows glowing faintly. Kiran got out, scanned the surroundings, then opened Sundar's door. "This way. It's safe for now." Inside, the air smelled of wood and old paper. The farmhouse was clearly a safe house, repurposed with subtle signs, security cameras tucked under shelves, a steel-reinforced door disguised as a pantry, and a table filled with laptops and communication equipment. Sundar sat down slowly, his hands resting on the worn wooden table. Kiran slid a file toward him. Printed pages, photos, satellite images. "We intercepted a transmission. It was encrypted, routed through 3 continents, but the target was clear. You. Specifically, your role in the launch." Sundar opened the folder. His name was circled on several internal documents, ones he hadn't even seen before. Redacted lines, timestamps, internal memos. And then he saw it. A directive marked confidential, originating from a private network in a country where digital freedom was notoriously suppressed. "They're planning to discredit you," Kiran said, "or worse, make you disappear, before the launch goes public." Sundar closed the folder slowly, his heartbeat now a steady drumbeat in his ears. "So what do we do?" Kiran's answer was simple. "We leak it first." Sundar looked up sharply. "What?" "We go public before they can silence you. We release the core principles, the data, the security protocols, everything. We make it impossible for them to suppress. We put the truth in the hands of the people before they can distort it." For a moment, Sundar was silent. His instincts as a leader told him to wait, to strategize, to be careful. But something deeper, his humanity, told him the time for careful had passed. If people were willing to go this far to stop the project, it only proved how necessary it was. "What about my keynote?" he asked. "You'll still deliver it," Kiran said, "but the world will already know and you won't be on your own." The plan moved quickly. Over the next few hours, the farmhouse became a war room. A small, trusted team joined via encrypted video calls. Engineers, security experts, even a retired journalist with contacts in major media outlets. They worked through the night, verifying files, drafting releases, and setting up a secure stream that would go live worldwide as dawn broke. Sundar stood by the window, watching the light creep across the fields. The rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung low, heavy with unspoken threat. He felt tired but focused. Beneath the pressure, a sense of calm had settled over him. Then the power flickered. Everyone froze. Kiran rushed to the control box. "Backup's still running," he said, "but someone's probing us. Maybe local surveillance." Sundar looked at the laptop screen where a progress bar showed 73% upload. The leak was still in motion. "How much time until it's live?" 10 minutes, said a voice on the call. They didn't get 10. A loud noise, like a car backfiring but sharper, echoed outside. Sundar turned to the window. Down the road, barely visible, a convoy of black vehicles was approaching. "We have to go," Kiran said, grabbing his laptop and bag. "Now." "What about the upload?" Sundar asked. "We'll finish it on the move. We've got satellite uplink. Just stay close." They moved fast. Through the back, across the field, toward a hidden path that led to a different road. Sundar's breath came in sharp bursts, the cold morning air biting at his lungs. The ground was slick, and he stumbled once, catching himself on a fence post. Behind them, the farmhouse lit up with searchlights. Voices barked orders in a language Sundar didn't recognize. As they reached a waiting vehicle, an explosion tore through the quiet. Sundar turned just in time to see flames erupt from the house. The screen on Kiran's laptop blinked once, then resumed, upload at 91%. The car sped away, tires spitting mud. Sundar didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. Inside the car, he watched the progress bar climb. At 98%, the screen went dark. "Signal's been jammed," Kiran muttered. "Can you reboot it?" Sundar asked. "No, not from here." They were running out of time, and the truth was still trapped in a machine now offline. Sundar closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. "We need to find another way," he said. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear, a fire began to burn. The lighthouse signal, the city glimmered below like a fractured mirror of light and motion, distant and untouched. Sundar Pichai sat in the back seat of the speeding vehicle, watching the silent chaos unfold through the window. The road carved a black trail through the mountains, and ahead lay the only safe place left, a forgotten data node buried inside a retired research facility on the edge of Europe. It was their last hope. If they could access it, they could finish the upload and broadcast the truth before those chasing them could erase it completely. Beside him, Kiran's fingers danced across the keyboard of a portable drive linked to his laptop. Despite the jammed satellite uplink and the destroyed farmhouse, he had managed to preserve most of the project's core files. But without a secure server, without the right channel to reach the world, their entire mission was still hanging by a thread. "How far are we?" Sundar asked. 90 minutes if the roads stay clear," Kiran said, not looking up. "But we'll be exposed for most of the route. We can't afford another delay." The car's driver, a woman named Elira, an old friend of Kiran's from his intelligence days, navigated the terrain with quiet precision. Her eyes scanned each intersection, each tunnel entrance, each roadside camera like someone used to being hunted. She said little, but her presence gave Sundar a strange sense of calm, like a storm wrapped in silence. "You built this to help people," Elira said suddenly. Her voice was soft but carried weight. "And yet now you run from those trying to kill you for it. That's the world we live in." Sundar nodded slowly. "I believed access to truth would empower people. I still do." "It will," she said, "but not everyone wants that." They drove in silence for a while, winding down a switchback that looked out over a cold, sleeping valley. Sundar stared at the distance, thinking not of the threats behind them but of the faces this project was meant for. School children in dusty villages trying to connect to the world. Farmers learning about weather patterns to protect their crops. Families video calling their loved ones for the first time. To him, those moments were more real than any boardroom or stage. That was why this mattered. Not for recognition, not for legacy, but for them. But every cause has a cost. At a fuel station miles from anywhere, Elira stopped briefly to refuel. Kiran and Sundar stepped out, stretching their legs. The air smelled of pine and gasoline. In the distance, a pair of headlights blinked through the darkness. Sundar squinted. The vehicle wasn't moving. Someone's watching, he said. Kiran followed his gaze. We've got 3 minutes, maybe less. They jumped back into the car, Elira already pulling onto the road. Behind them, the still vehicle came to life, headlights flaring. Then came 2 more behind it. They found us, Elira said calmly. The car surged forward, tires biting into the asphalt. Sundar's hands gripped the seat as the chase began, a low, relentless pursuit down twisting roads where a single mistake could mean the end. The vehicles behind them moved like predators, staying just close enough to pressure them but not close enough to force a confrontation. They wanted Sundar alive, for now. They're driving us into a trap, Kiran said. They'll box us in before the border. Then we don't take the road, Elira replied. Without warning, she veered off the main route, onto a narrow gravel path that cut through thick woods. Branches scraped against the windows and the car rocked violently, but she didn't slow down. This path leads to a hydro station, Elira said. Abandoned, but it connects underground to the facility. We used it during Cold War operations. They won't know about it. 10 minutes later, they pulled up to a rusted metal fence barely standing. Behind it, an overgrown trail led into the trees. Beyond that, a crumbling concrete tower loomed like a forgotten sentinel. On foot from here, she said. Grab everything. Inside the hydro station, the air was thick with damp and old machinery. Echoes of water trickled somewhere below. Sundar followed Kiran through a maze of metal walkways and cracked walls until they reached a sealed steel hatch. Kiran punched, in a code. The lock groaned, then clicked open. Welcome to the lighthouse, he said. The room beyond looked like a time capsule. Dusty consoles, analog meters, but in the center stood a single black server unit, humming faintly. The last of its kind. A backup node built during a forgotten era of internet decentralization. It had one advantage. No one remembered it existed. Connect now, Sundar said. Get it done. As Kiran began the process, Sundar paced. He felt the weight of time pressing down. Each second felt stolen. The files began to transfer. This time, no satellite, no wireless link. Only a direct line through a secure, buried fiber network that hadn't seen traffic in over a decade. Slow, but invisible. Then the first warning flashed on Kiran's screen. They're pinging local nodes, he said. We're not broadcasting, but they know we're close. How long do we have? Sundar asked. 14 minutes, maybe less. Sundar sat down beside the server and stared at the screen. 23%, 24%, 25%. Too slow. What if we tell the world before we finish the upload? Sundar asked. Speak directly. Live. Let them know what's coming. Kiran hesitated. You want to go live without the files? They don't need proof yet. They need belief. We give them that. Now the files will reinforce it later. Kiran nodded. We can stream through the node, audio only, low bandwidth. Sundar adjusted the mic, took a breath, and began to speak. His voice echoed through the fiber channels like a pulse in the dark. He spoke not as a CEO, not as a leader of one of the world's most powerful tech companies, but as a father, a son, a man who once dreamed from a tiny house in Chennai. He spoke of connection, not just technological, but human. He told the world about the project, about the millions it aimed to serve. He spoke of barriers built not by nature, but by greed. And he made a promise that no matter what came next, the truth would not die in the shadows. Outside, engines roared in the distance. The enemy was near. Inside, the file ticked past 72%. They're coming, Elira said. She stood at the hallway. With her sidearm drawn, Kiran whispered, Almost there. The door shook with a sudden impact. A shout rang out. The lights flickered. Sundar kept speaking, and the signal kept rising. The breaking point. The door thundered again, metal against metal, echoing through the forgotten corridors of the hydro station like a warning bell tolling the end of time. Sundar Pichai didn't flinch. His voice stayed steady, flowing through the ancient server's audio relay like a quiet fire spreading across the world. Every word he spoke was wrapped in urgency, but anchored in something deeper. Conviction. Outside, shadows gathered. Inside, truth fought to breathe. Alira braced her back against the door, pistol raised, her eyes cold and focused. Kieran crouched beside the server rack, fingers working feverishly to maintain the stream and monitor the transfer progress. 87%, then 88%. The numbers moved slowly, but they moved. Outside, voices shouted in a language Sundar couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. They were no longer just trying to capture him. They were preparing to eliminate everything. Sundar leaned into the mic again. You may not know my name. You don't have to. But I am speaking to you now, not as a CEO, not as a figure in the news, but as someone who believes that knowledge belongs to all of us. And right now, someone is trying to take that from you. Someone is trying to silence a project that could lift entire nations. The transmission was bare bones, stripped of video, music, and branding. But what it lacked in polish, it made up for in truth. Somewhere, in villages without paved roads, in towns where schoolchildren shared a single tablet, people were listening. They didn't know why the voice was urgent, why the signal came through an old radio station frequency or a forgotten app ping. But they listened. We are not just code and corporations, Sundar continued. We are families, dreamers, builders, and the future belongs to those who dare to share, not those who hoard. A sharp cracking noise tore through the hallway. One of the attackers had fired at the lock. Sparks rained down. The door shuddered. 92%, Kieran muttered. Alira glanced at Sundar. We're not walking out through that hall. Once they breach, we have 60 seconds, maybe less. Kieran stood up, eyes wide. We have a fail-safe route. It's bad, but it'll take us through the drainage tunnel. Leads to the river. We need to move the second the upload finishes. Sundar looked at the screen. 93%. The bar ticked upward with painful slowness. He turned off the mic briefly, looked at Kieran and said, Promise me. If I don't make it out, you still release it. Kieran opened his mouth to protest, but Sundar cut him off with a steady look. Promise me. Kieran swallowed. I promise. The door jolted. Part of the frame snapped inward, 4%. How far is the tunnel? Sundar asked. 60 meters, Alira replied. We go through that hatch, crawl space to the right. Water's cold and high, but it's our only shot. 5%. Then the power blinked. Sundar froze. No, Kieran whispered, hands flying, over the controls. The lights returned, but the server's interface had locked. The upload froze at 96%. They found us on the node. They're injecting overload packets, Kieran said. They're trying to kill the system before it finishes. Sundar stepped forward, his voice calm. What do we need? We need a manual override. I have to restart the buffer queue. That'll give us 90 more seconds if we're lucky. He didn't wait for a reply. Sundar moved fast, pulling open a panel beneath the server, revealing a tangle of wires and rusted components. His fingers, steady from years of engineering before corporate leadership took over, found the analog core. He twisted a small reset module. The fan inside the unit groaned, then spun back to life. The screen flickered. 97%. Then 98%. Kieran grinned. It's moving. The attackers fired again. This time the door cracked. A piece of metal flew inward, cutting a slice in Alira's arm. She gritted her teeth, not moving, blood soaking into her jacket. Percent. The screen blinked green. It's out, Kieran said. The files are live. Servers in 3 countries mirrored and shared. It's done. For a moment, no one moved. Then Alira shouted, Go! They sprinted to the hatch, Kieran dragging the emergency case, Sundar clutching the hard drive that contained the original source. They ducked through the narrow tunnel, water rushing past their boots, the ceiling low and dripping. Behind them, gunfire erupted. Bullets ricocheted off the concrete. Alira stayed last, firing 3 measured shots down the corridor, then ducking, through just as a final round clipped the wall beside her. They plunged into the drainage shaft, icy water swallowing them to the waist. The tunnel sloped downward sharply, then opened into a swirling river that waited like a hungry mouth. Without hesitation, Elira jumped in, followed by Kieran. Sundar hesitated for just a breath, long enough to hear the footsteps behind them, boots slamming against metal, voices shouting. Then he jumped. The current tore him forward. The cold stunned his senses, but he held tight to the drive, kicking hard, staying low, letting the river drag him into darkness. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Sundar lost track. He came to rest on a shallow bank, coughing water from his lungs, vision swimming. Above, dawn was breaking, soft and gray, with a thin line of gold stretching across the horizon like hope refusing to be extinguished. Kieran crawled up beside him, breathing hard. Elira followed, her arm still bleeding. "You made it," she said, voice hoarse. Sundar nodded, shaking. "Did they chase?" Kieran looked back at the river. No, they didn't follow. Not into this. They lay in silence for a moment, the rush of the water their only companion. Then Sundar's phone buzzed. Somehow it still worked. A single message had come through. An email. The subject line read, "We saw it." It was from someone he hadn't spoken to in years, a policy leader at the United Nations. Sundar opened the message. "We saw what you released. We're calling a summit. This changes everything." He handed the phone to Kieran. It worked. The project was no longer a secret. The knowledge was out, and now the world had to decide what to do with it. But even as Sundar sat there, soaked and shivering, something unsettled stirred in his mind. He had escaped the chase, but something darker, something more coordinated, was still moving. They hadn't tried to kill him until the very end, which meant they wanted him alive for something else, and whatever it wasn't over. Legacy in the silence, the cold of the river had sunk deep into Sundar Pichai's bones. Even wrapped in a dry blanket days later, he still felt the chill. Not of water, but of what he now knew. Across the world, the files had ignited a firestorm. What began as a quiet mission to connect the disconnected had become a global conversation, an awakening, yet in the quiet corners of the aftermath, beneath the noise and headlines, Sundar understood something even more profound. The truth had survived, but its victory had come at a price not yet counted. The safe house where he now rested was far from any city, hidden in the hills of an unnamed country. No one from the outside could find them unless they were invited. Kieran was pacing in the next room, coordinating interviews with journalists, policymakers, and educators who had received the data dump. Elira had gone dark, vanishing into the underground again, her job done, her debt repaid. Sundar stared at the fire in the small hearth. Its flickering light made shadows dance on the wooden walls, as if reminding him that even in warmth, darkness lingered. The door opened. Kieran entered, face pale. "We've got a problem," he said. Sundar looked up, his expression calm but focused. "What kind?" Kieran sat down, placed a tablet on the table between them. The screen showed a message, heavily redacted, but unmistakable in its tone. "This came from an internal relay. It's old. It was buried deep in your project's satellite contracts." "What is it?" Sundar asked. Kieran hesitated. "Insurance. Someone at the highest level embedded a kill switch into the infrastructure. Itself. If the program ever threatened major interests, corporate or governmental, they could trigger a self-destruct. Not just for the files, but the physical access points, the satellites, the towers, the routers, everything." Sundar leaned forward. "Is it still active?" "We're not sure, but someone tried to activate it last night. One of the satellites reoriented. If it hadn't been manually overridden by a junior engineer in Bangalore, the entire Indian node would have gone dark." The words hung heavy. Sundar had known there would be opposition. He hadn't expected sabotage from within. "So what now?" he asked quietly. Kieran looked him in the eye. "They failed to stop the message. Now they'll try to poison the aftermath. Fake reports, data breaches, manipulated footage. They'll make the world question your intentions. Sundar nodded. Then we give them no reason to doubt. Full transparency. Every file. Every communication. Every internal memo. Let the world see all of it. Good, bad, and unfinished. Even the ones that show the gaps in security, the funding inconsistencies, especially those, Sundar said. If we ask the world to trust us, we must trust it first. Kiran hesitated, then smiled faintly. You know you could walk away. You've done more than enough. Sundar stood walking slowly to the window. Outside, snow was falling gently, the flakes soft against the glass. He thought of his childhood, of the long walks to school, of saving his father's paychecks to afford a single transistor radio. He thought of the people listening now on broken phones and shared computers, hoping that someone hadn't lied to them again. It's not about enough, he said. It's about finishing what we started, with honesty, with humility. Kiran reached into his bag and handed Sundar an envelope. This came for you yesterday. No name, but you should read it. Sundar opened it slowly. The paper was handwritten, ink slightly smudged. It was from the student on the plane, the one who had sat next to him in economy, the boy with the coding textbook. The letter was short. Mr. Pichai, I didn't know who you were when we met, but I've been following your project since the leak. My school is one of the first to be connected. I used the new link to finish my first app. It helps local farmers track crop prices using voice input in our dialect. I just wanted to say thank you, not for being a CEO, for being kind. That's what I'll remember most. Sundar folded the letter slowly, his fingers trembling slightly. That, more than the summit meetings, more than the headlines, was his answer. Not fame. Not victory. Impact. He turned back to Kiran. We go public again. Video this time. Live. Just me. No team, no branding. One camera. I'll talk. Not about what happened. Not about what they tried to do. But about what comes next. Kiran nodded, already preparing. The next day, a simple live stream appeared online. No countdown. No graphics. Just a man in a sweater, sitting before a plain background. Sundar looked into the lens with eyes that had seen too much but still chose hope. He spoke of choice, of kindness, of how connection wasn't about profit but about dignity. He told the world that the power to shape the future now rested with them, not with governments or companies but with individuals, people who chose to share, to teach, to uplift. This isn't my project anymore, he said. It's yours. And he meant it. After the broadcast, he stepped outside, walking alone into the snowy woods. He needed no applause, no parade. What mattered had already begun to grow. Weeks later, when the final pieces of the project were passed into the hands of educators, nonprofits, and local leaders, Sundar quietly returned to his family. He resumed a quieter life, one where the spotlight no longer followed him, but where he knew the light he'd helped spark would continue to shine in places no camera would ever reach. And somewhere, in a small classroom on the edge of a forgotten village, a girl logged into the internet for the first time, her eyes wide with wonder. She didn't know Sundar Pichai's name, but she would learn. And maybe, one day, she would change the world too.